Hello, welcome everyone on my channel. Today I have a special guest, Angelo Dilullo, and this is my favorite spiritual teacher of all the time, really. Angelo has his own channel. It's called Simply Always Awake. You should definitely check this out if you are interested in the topic of awakening. He also wrote a book. It's called Awakening, Awake, It's Your Turn, and I couldn't recommend it enough. Seriously, I recommend it from the bottom of my heart. This is the best book I have ever read in my entire life. No kidding. So I'm very, very excited to have Angelo there on the other side. I'm a little bit nervous because this is my first interview in English. This is my second language, but I'll do my best to communicate as well as I can. So hello, Angelo, and thank you very much for being there.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me to discuss this topic, which is my favorite.
Okay, so normally, as I've seen in other interviews, there's a giant introduction of your story, how it happened for you, but I find it a little bit uninteresting, honestly, because I want to hear your pointers because you are incredibly clear with that. So if you watch this interview carefully, then you will know Angelo just by practice, just by listening to him. So I think it's not that important to know his story. If you are interested, just go to the other interviews and we'll go straight to the questions because we have many, but very many to cover. So first of all, what is awakening and how do I know that it's for everyone and that it's not another scam?
Okay. What is awakening? Well, I really like this statement that Joseph Campbell made when he was being interviewed by Bill Moyers, and he said he was talking about myth. Joseph Campbell is an expert in the field of myth, and he said, "I don't believe in telling people to be interested in something because it's said to be important. I believe in being interested in something because it catches you somehow." So awakening, this topic, and it's actually not a topic, and it's not a body of knowledge, and it's not a way of understanding things either. What it is a possibility, and it's not a possibility out there somewhere. It's a possibility in you, the listener. So and so you might say, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, for me, what it meant was it was a possibility to get under or to find a solution to the major problem that I found myself in the middle of when I was growing up. And it didn't have so much, it seemed like it had things to do with what was external to me, but ultimately I could feel that there was something internal. It was something about the way I was processing reality. There's something about the way I was interfacing with other people, with the world, with my own thoughts that felt really, really uncomfortable. Now, I will say that this isn't just me that perceives this. I think everybody perceives it to some degree, but there's a huge variation in how uncomfortable it is. You might call it inauthenticity. You might call it never actually getting permission from the social matrix or constructs to talk about what's most important to you. Maybe because you don't even have words for it, and yet it's something in you that wants to be addressed. It's a yearning. It's a tendency to turn inward. That's what awakening is about. Awakening is about how to directly address that. And I'll add one thing to that is it's about how to address it in a way that is thoroughly internally congruent. It is self-validating. It's not like you suddenly go, oh, I understand something a different way and now I'm better than other people or anything like that. It's something it's a movement from that which felt in some sense unreal or unsatisfying and uncomfortable to something that's far more vast and real. And it's also surprising by nature. This shift, this movement that I'm calling awakening is surprising when it occurs. It has to be because the limitations of what you take yourself to be are the problem. It's like you're the warden of your own prison and you don't even realize it. And maybe you do sense it, but you don't know how to get out of that prison, right? So when I talk about awakening, I can't talk about awakening as a subject. I have to talk about awakening, just as you said in your introduction, in a way that actually gives somebody a taste of what I'm talking about. And as I'm speaking, that I'm always pointing. I'm always just I'm throwing the lines out there, and whoever bites. I can't decide that. So the proof in the pudding, or the litmus test for this, is, does it work for you? Does it open something up for you? Does it spark something in you that goes, oh, okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Oh, I can turn toward that. It's been there the whole time. I've just always, in a sense, been taught not to look there. And I'm saying, no, look there. Go turn inward, take the backward step. So how do you know it's not another scam? You don't know it's not another scam until it happens. Until the moment it actually occurs, there will be doubt. And sometimes there'll be a lot of doubt. So if I could say what business I'm in when I talk to people about this, it's mitigating doubt. It's also using doubt to show people, hey, do you notice that this blanket of doubt is not just about spirituality or about awakening? It's about your whole life. You felt it your whole life. Don't you wonder if there's a way to not feel that heavy blanket of doubt all the time? Yeah. And here's the deal. Is it for everyone? Well, I can't decide that. Is it possible for anyone to wake up? Of course it is. It is possible for anyone to wake up. But that does not mean that I hold a position that says everyone should wake up, everyone could wake up, everyone will wake up, that we're making a human race level movement into a higher level of consciousness. I can't say any of that. I don't know. And it's not really my concern, because you can't decide how other people wake up. You can't decide whether society wakes up, but you can decide to turn inward to that prompting in yourself and let the natural process happen, and it will surprise you. So there will be doubts that this could be a scam. It could just be more of the same, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic until it happens. I don't even know how to say that. It's not even a happening. It's not an event. It doesn't occur in time. It's a blowing open of all of those paradigms of time, space, moving, doership, self, other, all that just gets blown open, and you see what's what. It's a glimpse of reality that you're not just seeing or perceiving or understanding, but living. And that's when it's like, oh, okay, there's no doubt anymore.
Fine, brilliant. What I really like about your work is that you put it very, very simply, and basically you get rid of many taboos and many myths related to awakening. So I have some questions to you, and I want you to address these questions very briefly. So we'll see how it goes. So first question. Do I need to be spiritual to wake up?
Definitely not. No. And so that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, and I try to speak in terms that are simple, basic, human, natural, and not weighed down by too much context, is that, as I mentioned, anyone can wake up. And I've seen people wake up who have no spiritual interest, aren't Buddhists, I've seen scientific people wake up. I've seen atheists wake up. I've seen Christians wake up. So because of that, and because of the way our mind tends to think in a tribal way, it has groupthink, we tend to look at things, groups, people, interests, and immediately we filter, is that for me or not for me? Am I interested or not interested? I wanted to take all that out so that you can't do that with yourself on this topic until you actually touch into it. Then you'll know if it's not even whether or not I can, it's whether or not I'm gonna do it right now. Yeah. Okay. Or whether I'm gonna work toward it. So so that's really the key for me, is that, like, it's a psychological thing, if anything, that we have a very, very strong tendency to think in terms of groups, especially when it comes to interests, and certainly political things or religious things are very heavily weighted that way. So I was trying to sort of bypass the mind's tendency to filter things out before it actually tastes it directly to know whether it's for you.
Okay.
Another answers it.
Yes, it does. Another common myth, do I need some special place to be or to go? Do I need to go to the India, to the monastery to wake up, or whatever?
No, these are great questions. You don't actually. You don't need to go any. How can I say this? Let me think of a good, clever way to say this. There's nothing specific you have to do. There's no teacher specifically you have to meet. There's nothing specifically you have to do. And the beliefs that there is will actually be fixating, can be fixating if you don't notice their beliefs, if you don't notice they're just thoughts. They will fixate. They can cause you to fixate a little bit and just have a flavor of something I'm missing out on, something I'm not doing right. It fits very nicely into shame, like something wrong with me. So noticing that those beliefs are actually not true is important. What I will say is, when say you've had an awakening and you're moving through deeper stages of realization or integration phases or whatever, however you want to say that, what I do sometimes tell people though is, if you tend to do things the same way all the time, try mixing it up. Try if you're like, oh, I like to read, I know the teachers, I do this, I do that, but I never go to retreats. Maybe you should try to go to a retreat. Maybe sometimes you have to try different things and be willing to step out of your comfort zone. With that said, there's no specific exact set of circumstances, thing, teacher, technique, or practice or group that is like the one that's going to be the best thing to wake you up. It's not really like that. It's more of a heart level commitment because you're carrying around what you need. That's the most important lesson.
Okay. Next myth. Does waking up take time? Because, this is very common belief that I wake up someday in the future.
Okay, I'll say it this way. When you stop believing that you're going to wake up someday in the future, then awakening is naturally revealed to already be the case. That's one way of saying it. There's no language is not designed to talk about this particular thing you and I are talking about when it comes to time. Awakening is not an event. It happened. Like sometimes I'll say it can happen right now. Like it happens in 1 second. It happens in less than a second. It happens not in time at all. But the mind has no way to make a paradigm out of no time. The mind cannot think in terms of eternity, but you can experience eternity. You are experiencing it already. So in one sense, it's when the mind stops, when the machine of time turns off. But that's not the same thing as just telling yourself, oh, I don't believe in time. You can't believe your way into it either, right? It's really a deep resignation. It's a surrender into the eternal nature of this moment right now. And a really good way to do that is either inquiry, self-inquiry, seeing between thoughts. There's a lot of ways in, but at some point you'll taste the flavor of that eternal nature where there is no time. You're like, whoa, there is no past here anywhere. There's no past. There's no future. There's only this. And that is often, not always, but often where awakening actually flowers. You can taste the timeless and not have an awakening, but if you kind of remain in the timeless, you teach yourself to get back there again and again. Sooner or later, it will occur, if that makes sense. So it's kind of where timelessness meets time in the relative sense. It feels like time to a person, but boy, when it breaks open, you're not experiencing time. You know what timelessness is, and you know it more. You know it's more real than time for sure.
Okay. Do I need some special practice routine to wake up?
Everybody's a little different. If somebody is so undisciplined that they just can't stay still for a moment, focus on anything at all, it probably is helpful to have some sort of practice, some sort of just basic meditation practice daily. If the mind is just so constantly engaged and especially if there's a lot of emotional repression going on, it can be hugely beneficial to develop a daily meditation routine to calm the body mind enough to actually really start to look inward, to just taste that eternal nature and notice you tasted it. So generally speaking, unless you just really have an aversion to it, I would recommend people try some sort of meditation practice. But I will always caution people, that's not the equivalent of awakening. You can meditate for 2 decades and not wake up, and it happens. Awakening is more about intention. It's more about, again, surrender. It's about letting go than it is about any type of practice. But yes, meditation practice, I think, does kind of calm the nervous system enough to just make some space for good inquiry.
I ask you details about practice versus non-practice later, because I want to go further into this topic. But first things first, so let's go to another myth or common belief. Will I go crazy or insane while waking up?
Yeah.
This is common fear, I believe.
It is a common fear, and it's important to address it. So what I find is that when you're approaching this first shift in identity, this in Zen might be called Kensho, what we're calling awakening. As you approach that, it's very common that the gloves come off with your ego. It starts giving you thoughts that are much more fearful, and it will use thoughts that scare you. So if it's scary to think of yourself losing your intellect, losing your capacity to problem solve and protect yourself mentally and stuff, then that's the fear that's going to come up. If you have young children, often the fear that comes up is, well, what if you abandon your children, right? So the ego does this sneaky thing. And remember, when I say ego in this way, I don't mean there's like some evil entity and you call it an ego. I just mean that the thoughts that you believe that feel like your thoughts, they feel like your actual concerns, those are going to be the ones that catch you. And then they're going to be the ones that come back every time you walk up to that fearful edge, right? So just know that it's par for the course. It's relatively normal to start to have these intense fear thoughts right before awakening, or when you start digging in, authentically. And the most important thing is just recognizing that's one thought right now. It's a thought. Could it actually happen? Could you actually go insane? I've never seen anybody go insane after awakening at all. I've seen people get into sort of disorganized places, but it's usually disorganized. I mean, like in the way they're functioning, but it's usually people who have awakenings out of the blue and don't even know what it is. That's a really hard thing to go through. I find that people who have spiritual practices, who have some understanding of it, and most importantly, have a buy-in to the process, I find that they actually do pretty well. And usually after awakening, they feel better than they've ever felt in their entire life. It's just a feeling of freedom and flow and so forth. So it's not a concern I usually have for people. The only exception would be if someone has a history of psychosis. If they have a history of schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, doesn't mean they can't wake up, but I would tell them, be very careful, work with somebody closely who can monitor you, make sure you have good insight into how you're doing, making sure you're taking your medications and all that. But the average person, it's not like awakening triggers insanity. If anything, it calms the mind so dramatically that those fears tend to just dissolve. So
yeah. And I think this is the most helpful thing I've came across, because you wrote in your book some common thoughts that may occur while waking up. For example, oh my God, something went really wrong. This is not how it's supposed to be. I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to be insane or whatever. And just because you wrote this in your book, and when these thoughts came, I just saw, oh, okay, it's fine. Angelo wrote about this. I can see this is one thought just right now. So it's not such a big deal. So yeah, it was incredibly helpful that you acknowledge that.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Okay, so another common belief or myth. Do I need to get rid of everything to wake up? Do I need to lose all my attachments?
No, for an awakening, definitely not. You don't need to change anything for awakening. You have to be willing to let go of the attachment to your own narrative to wake up. Now, as realization deepens, attachments do go away. Specifically, like desire and aversion, at some point will fall away. But that doesn't equate to like throwing all your material belongings away, and it also doesn't equate to like you'll never be in a emotionally connected romantic relationship or something. These are often what we associate with non-attachment. We associate monasticism, right? Because traditionally, like Buddhism grew up in monasticism. Well, it grew out of Hinduism, which the monastic communities were very highly regarded, and there's still monastic communities today. What I generally notice in people, and I've seen people wake up both in monastic communities and in household life situations, what I've noticed is they tend to sort of stay where they are. I don't see a lot of people waking up who are sort of householders and then they all of a sudden join monastic communities, and vice versa necessarily. So I think it's a bit more of a sort of lifestyle tendency that people have of whether they're going to be monastic or whether they're going to be more engaged in typical vocations and relationships. So non-attachment actually doesn't mean the external practicalities of that aren't there. Interestingly, you can be completely non-attached in a relationship. It can be challenging in the relationship, especially for the other person until they're waking up, but it doesn't mean that the outwardly obvious aspects of being a human being in our, say, Western culture aren't there.
Okay. Sometimes some guru tends to promise that when you wake up, all your problems are going to be solved. Is it true?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll say it this way. I'll use this like two truths thing, the relative and absolute. So before awakening, in one sense, you could say the only thing we're aware of is the relative world. We're only aware, but not only are we aware of it, we're bound up and identified with it, and that's really uncomfortable. When you wake up, you suddenly realize, sure, there's a relative aspect to me. I'm a body. I'm moving through time. I own things. I have problems. The body's going to get old and die and all that. The relative truth is there, but a whole other dimension that we just literally can't even talk about opens up, and that is awakening, right? And we'll call that dimension the absolute aspect of reality. The absolute aspect has no recognition of a body, mind. If you want to know what the absolute aspect is, just read the Heart Sutra, right? And so that absolute aspect, you can't ever forget. It's undeniable, and in that there are no problems. There never could be a problem. There's no separation. There's nothing that needs to be solved, and there's also no end to problems. It's just impossible to describe, and it's incredibly freeing. Now, what happens is, you could say, from being identified with the relative for so long, it's like you've been in the desert for a long time. When you finally get out of the desert, or when you finally find some water in the desert, you tend to drink a lot. So you kind of overdrink that absolute. Everyone will, to some degree, and some people to a very large degree, to where you start to actually, without knowing it, you start to identify with the absolute, because the mechanism of identification is not gone yet. That's still around, and it can be very easy to overlook it when you just keep attuning to the absolute message or absolute experience. And you can meditate yourself into it as well. So you're kind of trying to like meditate yourself into oblivion in a sense sometimes, but that's just a reaction to the uncomfortable nature of identification. That is not enlightenment yet. That is not liberation. Liberation's when you truly live relative and absolute as not two experiences at all. That there is not a difference between the world of form and the world of emptiness, that they are literally interwoven. They are the same thing. They're interdependent. You could say they're independently co-arising, is one way of saying it. And that's the deeper truth. So right after awakening, after an initial awakening or shift, it would actually be quite a mistake to be like, you're done. There's nothing more to do. That's not a good place to be. A better place to be is to be humble, to be that's a good time to have a teacher. Actually, it's a good time to do some emotion work, and to be more porous, be more vulnerable, and keep practicing, keep inquiring around beliefs and emotions and things.
Yeah, and some people, especially from Neo-Advaitas, tends to stop there. There's nothing to do. There's no one here. There's no problems and stuff. Yeah, but we will get to this later. So the next common belief, I've mentioned Advaita Vedanta, so I think it's related to that. Is it true that when I wake up, I will be swimming in the ocean of bliss?
Right after you wake up, you will be. Often you are. It's quite enjoyable. It's quite enjoyable. And it's an enjoyment that's beyond opposites. It's not the kind of enjoyment that sort of, like, to put it in a physiologic way, that the left brain enjoys something because it gained something, but then it's just setting itself up to feel like it lost something. Like, it's the push-pull, that world of gain and loss. Like, it's not that kind of enjoyment at all. Again, it's a transcendent enjoyment. It's an enjoyment of feeling the true peace of non-duality and non-attachment at the same time. It's ineffable. It's impossible to talk about. So it's quite enjoyable, and it's really it's a blissful time. It's a wonderful time for people, and it lasts maybe a few months, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years. I've heard of 2 years, but it tends to come to a sort of end. The insight doesn't come to an end. The insight is still there, but you're pushed to the next stage of it, which is what I mentioned in the last question of, now it's time to find where relative and absolute not only meet, but are completely and fully integrated. And that process can take, well, in one sense, it can just keep going, because it gets subtler and subtler and subtler. That integration gets subtler and subtler. There is a finite end to the sense of an individual, though, for sure. That also happens later on.
Yeah. Okay. Next myth, I think it's very related to me when I meditate. I often see myself someday in the future when I get enlightened and I'm some kind of spiritual guru, and there are people there on my audience, and I teach them and I preach to them like I'm some kind of special. So the question is, am I going to be some kind of special, or will I gain some special powers when I wake up? Because often ego
Yeah.
imagines that.
Yeah, best case scenario, if it goes well and you are in that position of a teacher, you won't get anything from it. You won't get anything your mind is imagining: validation, love, appreciation. There will be nowhere for that to land anymore. That's best case scenario if that happens. The truth of it is you can't really choose that. You just can't. It may happen, it may not. Who knows? But I would, as I caution in my book, and I say it for reasons that don't have so much to do with the overall landscape of spiritual teaching, but more to do with the individual practitioner. And that is, don't try to teach too early. I usually say that because I see a lot of it. I see it's like you haven't really done the deep emotion work and things like that. And what you don't realize is you're transmitting your own fixations to people at the same time as you're transmitting the Dharma in a way. So, so if you're going to use this life for anything, use it to just keep waking up. And then if that happens, it will choose you. It will, like for me, it definitely chose me. And I could go through all the strange details and circumstances that got me into the position I'm in right now. And it's very strange, actually. I would have never guessed it. I don't have a preference about it, honestly. Whether I do this or don't do this, whether I ever talk about this topic again or not, it doesn't actually matter at all in any real way. And yeah, it's very strange how it played out for me. When I watch people that I feel satisfied that I can actually send people to them to teach, so I get a lot of requests for one-on-one teaching. I just can't do. I do a lot of it, but I can't almost ever add people because I just have so many already. So I have people I can refer those to who come in contact with me and want to work one-on-one, which is it's a very, very good, valuable thing to do if you have a good teacher, if you have someone who really is essentially empty of self. But there are not a lot of people I really trust, because I have to know someone well enough to know them personally, to feel their fixations and to see, like, are they actually ready to do this, and can they teach from no agenda? If you can teach from no agenda, that's a very powerful transmission. So I notice it's very interesting. Often the people who I sense or directly ask me that they want to teach are not always the people that I feel like I'm ready to ask them to teach. It's the people who are like, I'm not sure. I don't think I can do that. I'm like, yes, you can. Okay. Strangely, those are often the people that I sense are ready. So and again, I don't mean to be elitist at all about teaching. There are many ways to do spiritual teaching. There are many modalities, and it's wonderful that this is becoming so widespread. I love it. But if you want to talk to people directly about awakening, just make sure you know it all the way to the bottom, because you can confuse yourself. You can even get yourself into positions that are hard to get out of. Yeah.
Okay. Will I get knowledge about how reality works when I wake up?
It's what you get is better than knowledge. So here's the thing that's interesting. I often come into contact with inquisitive minds that love knowledge. They love to understand. And I have that kind of mind. Like, I can relate very well to that. It's kind of a masculine thing, but it can be men, women, anyone can be this way. But I do find people, and I can feel it with them. Like they just really want to know, they want to understand. And that's great. That's really wonderful, actually. Especially in the relative world. What I will tell you is, especially initially, that can be a barrier, because what you don't realize is you keep trying to understand awakening, and that's not the same thing as waking up. In fact, it's actually a bit of a counterproductive movement initially, because the first big movement is a movement beyond conceptuality. It's a disentangling identity from the mind is what it is, especially the first movement. So it can be a little bit of a hindrance initially. But what I often tell people is, just trust that what you're going to get out of this is so far beyond intellectual knowledge that you won't even care about those questions anymore. You might be momentarily interested, like I am. I'm momentarily interested in reading about, quantum chromodynamics. I love quantum field theory. I read about that kind of stuff, but does it matter? I'm directly experiencing reality. Like, what why do I need to understand anything? There's no need at all whatsoever. To watch this body die and decay away is going to be the most fascinating thing ever, right? What you get out of this is just so far beyond intellectual understanding. The other thing I will always tell people is look into, because there's often mixed agendas with intellectual understanding. We often have safety built into it because it's strongly rewarded in our society to be smart, intelligent. You have physical rewards, you have financial rewards, and so we don't always realize we've actually tied in, this is deep stage stuff, but we've tied in security to it, we've tied validation into it, and when that starts to disentangle, it suddenly looks different. You can be interested or not be interested, but it doesn't feel heavy anymore. It doesn't actually matter.
Great. Do I need to be completely thoughtless to wake up? And will I lose all my thoughts when I wake up?
Yeah, you don't have, so to equate enlightenment with not having thoughts, in my opinion, is a mistake at best. It's not really like that. The mind does calm down tremendously. I will give counter examples for you, and for anyone who doesn't clearly get this. I know many people who have what they would call loss of thought process or blank mind, severe depersonalization, severe derealization, and they will tell you they have no thoughts at all, and they're absolutely miserable. They think it's the absolute worst thing to go through that you could ever imagine, right? On the other hand, I know deeply realized people who would say they still have thoughts. They're infrequent. There's no attachment to thoughts. There's no pushing or pulling on thoughts. There's no one for whom that thought refers. There's no one to whom that thought refers. There's nothing moving from moment to moment, from thought to thought, or sound to sound, or visual image to visual image. But a thought is simply an experience arising bubble-like out of nothingness, just like sound is, just like sensation is. So when someone says, I don't have any thoughts, I would actually be curious to challenge them a little bit and find out. And because often what you don't realize is you do have thoughts. They're beliefs. They're subtle thoughts. They're beliefs that are actually structuring your reality, and you don't even know it. I've like literally never listened to Sam Harris, but someone, not that I have a problem with him, I just hadn't heard his stuff, but someone told me a quote that he said. It was really good. He said, ego is what it feels like to be thinking without knowing you're thinking. Yeah. So sometimes I've heard people say, I've even heard spiritual teachers say, like, if you're really, really enlightened, you'll have no thoughts at all. And then they'll like talk about other people that they think have thoughts. I'm like, all I hear is your belief right now. I hear this total view there. There's a view functioning right now and you don't even see it. That's a thought. To me, that's a thought. So a lot of this depends on what do you actually define as thought. To me, consciousness is thought, and thought is consciousness. It has no it doesn't have to have any content. I can sit in contentless consciousness for hours on end, and it's enjoyable. It's just an experience, but it is not the same thing, and it's not the same insight as non-dual, as equanimity, as even the realization of no self or the self sense going completely away. With that said, with all of that said, the thoughts tend to definitely calm down a lot. The mind gets much quieter, much more peaceful. But what often people don't realize is what makes it so much more peaceful and quiet, and it can take a while to even recognize this because it's such a strange shift when the self drops, is that it's not necessarily the lack of thoughts. It's the lack of any relationship to thought. It's the lack of anything that those thoughts could ever refer to or ever were referring to. It's like a light flashing in the middle of space. It has no reference point, but there's not even space. That's the weird thing. Even space and time come into being with the thought, the appearance of space and time. It's all just appearances.
Wow. This was so powerful. And yeah, I see, and I struggle myself with that. For example, sometimes when I go to meditate and I see it, thoughts tend to be so funny because there's a thought, oh my God, I cannot meditate. There are too many thoughts right now. I need to get up. This is so tricky and so funny. And this is one single thought. There are too many thoughts to meditate. I cannot do it right now.
What I often tell people is when that thought comes, so the very fact that you recognize it as a thought is so important. Once you recognize it, you could actually hold that, just bring that thought back. Oh, there are too many thoughts to, and then regard it as like a movie on a screen. Get closer to that thought. How do you know there's a thought there? Well, that must be made of something. Well, what's it made of? Can you get experience close? So one thought can be your tuning fork into consciousness. And then once you're fully steeped in consciousness, everything may stop, and then the next drop could happen too. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the last questions from this part about myths and common beliefs. Are psychedelics enough for people to wake up?
I used to say I hadn't met anybody who had what I would call a true authentic awakening on psychedelics. But now I've met a couple that probably did have an initial awakening on psychedelics, but the ones I can think of definitely had some spiritual interest before, and maybe we're doing some practices. So I think it probably can happen. I wouldn't depend on it necessarily, and it can have some side effects that can really cause a lot of dysphoria with people and so forth. But I'm definitely not opposed to using those for the process. Will they take you all the way to liberation? No way. There's too much other kind of work to do. They may be part of the process. They may be for you, but there are too many other things to address and too many subtle nuances that will just hide in the periphery if you don't address them directly. So they may be a piece of the puzzle for some people. They're not necessary. I know that. But they may be a part of the puzzle for some people, and just do it safely, of course, and with good sources and stuff.
Okay. So the next part is a series of quick questions, and especially just related to your experience, moment to moment. So first one, are you conscious during your sleep?
Well, okay, if you want me to answer directly, there's no one who's conscious, but there can be consciousness during dream sleep. During deep sleep, there's no consciousness.
The other way to say it is, do you have lucid dreams?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because lucid dream would mean you're in control, but there's not, the sense of doership isn't here. So I don't have lucid awakeness.
Okay. So what are dreams? Yeah. So what are dreams to you? Nighttime dreams?
Yeah,
Does
it's
it
interesting.
differ from what you see right now? Actually,
Not really. It's funny because so when dreams are happening for me, I've looked at this because people ask me, and so I looked at it one time just out of curiosity. It's like it feels very much the same as waking a consciousness. It feels the same as waking consciousness. There's something here that's just not consciousness. It has nothing to do with consciousness at all. And again, it's ineffable. I can't really talk about it, but I point to it all the time. But when I'm talking about human consciousness, which is everything you've ever seen, believe, structure of self, structure of other, awakeness, self-awareness, all of that stuff is consciousness. And as is every thought you've ever had, as is every perception of anything you've ever had. That is all consciousness. So the consciousness awake and consciousness asleep to me are very similar in one way. And that is, there's not anything that believes it anymore. It's very strange. So when the dreams are happening, first of all, it's very quiet. My mind is quiet in sleep. So if there's a structured dream where I can actually see a dreamscape and see like events or something, that it's even that structured in consciousness, that's not super common anymore. And when it does happen, it feels just dreamy like this does. It doesn't feel like there's nothing that believes it. It doesn't feel like anything's actually happening. It just feels like movements in consciousness. So it's kind of like consciousness just knows consciousness now, and it's just aware. It's just that self-aware space of consciousness. When I say self-aware, there's no big S self in it. The I am sense is gone. And when the I am sense is gone, you know it.
Oh my God.
Now, some people would say that I am sense can never go away, right? It's like you could say the big self with the big S. This is a very interesting one historically, because Ramana Maharishi, as far as I've ever seen, and I haven't studied him extensively, but he always talked about it as like the final thing, the self with a big S. Nisargadatta did not. Nisargadatta did not say that. He talked about the I am sense, but he also said if you regress properly, the I am sense will disappear, and that's exactly what happens. So,
I have a question like that later on. Yes.
Yeah, this stuff is so subtle that it may just be words. I don't know. I can't know what this person realized or that person realized. I really can't know that. But some people's words are so clear, it's obvious. Like Dogen is very obvious. Nisargadatta is very obvious. Buddha, of course. You know what they mean by no self, and the eighth fetter and all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So do you still get caught by thoughts? Sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say no, not in the way that I remember it being in the past. But I will say that what I tell people is no matter how deep realization goes, even beyond the sense of any structure of self, always have a healthy respect for the forces of delusion. And what I mean by that now is, for me, is it's very, very subtle stuff. So for me, what I love is to continue to dissolve any beliefs about realization itself, not in me, but in others. And I noticed like that's why I noticed how people can wake up. It's amazing. Like if I had a strong belief that only people who meditate hardcore Zen for years on end can actually wake. If I believe that, then I'm not going to even see the people who are waking up who aren't in that world. First of all, because I'll self-define myself into that world, and those are the people I'll talk to. But since I don't do that, since I've questioned my own beliefs so much, it's like, okay, I used to think waking up take a long time. Well, I have many examples that it doesn't. I used to think awakening was something that required a lot of hard work. I have many examples of people where it did not require any work and they woke up. I used to believe that, I have all these beliefs I used to have that I didn't even know they were beliefs, and they've just dissolved again and again and again. So for me, it's always more like, how can this go more into the practical, more into the everyday, more into like reaching the people who are the hardest to reach traditionally, people who suffer the most, people who have no access to this kind of stuff we're talking about. So for me, it's just about even being still open to any subtle beliefs I might have that person couldn't wake up or whatever. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it feels to me. It's a movement of compassion and love. It's just how, and vulnerability and willingness to see that, like, yeah, even though my mind is very quiet and that sense of self disappeared, it doesn't mean that this body mind can't be still moved by conditioning somehow, or condition. It can be, of course it can be. I like how Adyashanti said, I've never seen anybody who's seen an end to this. And that's saying a lot. Now, did Buddha find an end to it? Maybe he did. I don't know, but I can't ask him. So the truth of it, from what I see, is this continues to evolve. The selflessness or selfishness, even at the more subtler levels, tends to just dissolve more and more and more. These are deeply rooted behaviors that we have as human beings. So there's a saying in Buddhism, greed, hatred, and selfishness rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them. That's a beautiful thing to orient to.
Yeah, great. How much time daily do you spend on I am state, non-dual state, or full no self state?
No self isn't something that comes and goes.
Okay,
The
so it's
realization of no
permanent.
self is not something you can forget for 1 second.
Okay.
But again, it's not. It's so hard to talk about this because it's not a state. It's not a state. It's beyond states. It's not a perception. It's like a vacuum, or it's like a void or something. But even that, like, I can see how the mind will turn the void into something. It's like staring death in the face all the time. It's like being a walking dead person. These are like poetic ways of saying it.
So it's permanent and it's 24/7.
It's like having a front with no back, 24/7.
Yeah.
Non-dual. Okay. Non-dual is also that way. Like, appearances are always non-dualistic, but I will say that the apparatus that allows you to move through a three-dimensional world is still there. So I can still see how the thoughts put together three-dimensional space, and I can function just fine in that, usually. When sometimes I have to be careful, like when when it's dark and I'm in traffic and I'm in a place that I'm not familiar with and there's a lot of lights going different ways, I really have to focus, because like that car over there and this car over here, they're also inside of me, and they're the dashboard and the steering wheel and the car and the lights. It's all the same thing. So when the cues are really different, sometimes I do have to focus and be a little more careful, but I haven't gotten in an accident or anything. But I definitely notice, like, yeah, it can be challenging when you see the underlying truth that there's really non-separation and formlessness.
It just sounds like giant psychedelic trip all the time.
It kind of is, but the part of you that goes, whoa, oh, cool, that goes away completely. There's nothing to celebrate. There's no celebrator goes away completely.
Okay. So what about emotions like anxiety, fear, or anger? Do you still experience those?
No anxiety, fear. No, it's really weird. Like, even things that should cause fear, even physical fear, not like psychological fear, but physical fear, like situational fear, they don't. I haven't had my life threatened that I know of in for like ever, probably, but certainly not in the recent past where I thought maybe someone was going to stab me or shoot me. I don't know how I would respond to that. I'm guessing not much, but not too long ago, I was almost in a car accident. I was driving and a car turned right in front of me, and I would have hit it going very fast. Probably wouldn't have killed me, but it probably would have killed the driver, because I drive a Jeep, and my dog would have flown through the windshield. So I missed it barely, luckily, because I was paying close attention, and I swerved around and there was no other cars coming. But it was like, it was very, very close, and it could have been a very bad accident. And it was funny because right when I got around, I noticed immediately there were a couple thoughts that were like, oh, that would have been bad. The dog would have went through the windshield. That person would have died. And that was it. And then there was just dead quiet. I even noticed my heart rate didn't change at all. Like the body had no reaction whatsoever. So it's interesting with equanimity, when reactivity drops out, that you can have limited to no reactions to anything, but you can still respond. You can totally respond. And I did. Like in that moment, I responded just appropriately. But there was really there was no emotional charge there. And, it's hard to say because I haven't been physically threatened, but fear, I don't feel psychological fear.
Okay. So
sadness, I can feel sad. I can feel sadness. It's interesting, but it's very short-lived. And it doesn't feel unnatural at all. It doesn't feel, there's no resistance to it. I actually enjoy it.
Yeah. So my next question was, are you afraid of death? But it's clear that you are not. But
I don't think so.
Yeah. So are you sure, 100% sure that when your body dies, and then you don't cease to exist? Are you 100% sure that your being is forever?
I already ceased to exist. The illusion of a me is gone. So cessation can't cease.
Okay.
It's a paradox. There's zero anxiety about death. The problem of birth and death is gone completely. It's solved, you could say. Yeah.
Incredible.
I can't tell you how. I can't exactly put into words why that is, but it's just the most obvious thing. It's like it's already here.
So it's like the point is to die before you die.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you want to take up this that we're talking about, you want to take this challenge up, that is for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so what about emotion of loneliness? Because if you say like there is only consciousness, or there is non-duality, there's no two, there's no separation, there's only that, it might seem lonely. So do you sometimes experience loneliness?
I don't think so. No.
So isn't it lonely?
I mean, I hesitate to say anything is like 100% anything, like, because experiences change constantly. Everything is so in flux, in the sense, well, everything is in flux, but also not moving. So there's that paradox. But I don't recall, like when I'm alone, when I'm not around people for some time, it feels very, very peaceful and very enjoyable. Excuse me, very enjoyable.
Okay. Do you think that your realization can go deeper? If so, how?
For now, what it seems to be is, like I said before, everything can go deeper in one sense, and that is that the interplay between relative and absolute just becomes deeper and deeper, and it becomes clearer at a subtler and subtler level. What it does is amazing sometimes. Man, I don't want it to make it sound like some kind of magical thing or anything, but the synchronicities are incredible. Like the things that happen and the effects that happen even at a distance are absolutely mind-blowing. But I'm not doing it, and I'm also not enjoying it. It's just what's happening. That does seem to clarify more and more. So the depth of awakening, which people I interact with seem to enjoy, and it happens faster. The ability to relate it, the experience of having direct access to seemingly distant conditions is there for sure. But again, I'm really hesitant to talk about this stuff because I don't want to just make it sound like cities or magic stuff. But there is some pretty wild, mind-blowing stuff that happens, and it does seem to deepen for sure. But as I mentioned earlier, there's definitely a finality to the spiritual journey for the spiritual journeyer. Like that literally comes to an end, and Not a lot of people talk about that, probably because not a lot of people have experienced it, but many have, and more and more people do talk about it. I've seen, like, Violet and I had a video not too long ago. She just realized it just happened to her, basically. I did a video interview with Chris, and it happened to her as well. Adyashanti talks about it. Suzanne Non-Duality, I think her name is. I saw her video the other day. She had one talking about it. So, but even then, even when that ends, something walks out the other side of it. It's not a you, it's not a self. There's no self, but something keeps going, and that keep goingness continues to wake up to itself. It's very strange. It's the other side of self, the other side of when self comes to an end. It's so hard to talk about what even happens there. So there's definitely a finality for the spiritual seeker, for the individual, for the sense of identity does come to an end, and yet the clarity of realization continues to clarify. Ultimately, it's from what I've seen.
Okay, so it's finality for a person, but as mind is infinite, the realization goes on without the person, without the sense of a like Dogen
so
said.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Exactly. No self continues endlessly, and I'll say it this way. Sometimes I've said this to people, and even before the insight of no self, or the subtle self sense dropping completely out. But even before that, I kind of tell people, sometimes start approaching practice less from a standpoint of doing or being a practitioner, and start approaching it from a place of spontaneity, because that's how it starts to feel. And then at some point that's all that's left is spontaneity. And that's what carries itself forward. It's a non-paradigm. I would say it's a different paradigm, but it's just not a paradigm. Has no paradigm. It has no inherent view. It has no frame of reference anymore. And that itself is what carries itself on.
Okay. So some people on YouTube claims that after awakening, when you take psychedelics, it will have zero effects on them. So my question is, what would happen if you took psychedelics right now? Would you experience something? Would it be different? What do you think?
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, so several years ago, I smoked pot after many years after awakening, and it was really strong, actually. And I had done it years before, and I remembered it, but it was weaker back then, and so it was very strong. What I noticed was very interesting is it made thoughts feel really uncomfortable. So I would just stop and lay there and just have no thoughts, because I cannot have thoughts. I can, like, sort of just be in a thoughtless space. I just sat there in a thoughtless space. And then all I noticed was, like, the side effects on my body. I could feel like it definitely had effects on the body, and just felt like a lot of energy moving through. It was a little bit uncomfortable, but it was no big deal. So I just sat there without thoughts for a few hours until it wore off. So, and then I thought, well, I wouldn't do that again. Like, there was just, I couldn't even find a use for that. But I will say that I think in general, that's a little misleading of a statement, because the more you wake up, the more sensitive you are to everything. The more sensitive you are to alcohol, the more sensitive you are to people's energy around you. So to be like, oh, I don't feel anything anymore, or I don't have any effects from anything that happens in my body, I think you're selling yourself a bill of goods. You become very sensitive. Now, you may not react to it. But you're going to be aware of it for sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay, so how do you plan so-called future? Is there something different than before, if you're in your planning?
Well, it's definitely different than before awakening, for sure. Like, it's hard for me even to be, if I'm honest, to fully remember what it was like back then, but it felt very real. It felt like there was a future, and I was planning it, and I could screw it up, and I had to get it right. Like, it felt right. I think that's what people experience a lot of times, but that was gone years ago. That was gone years ago. So I don't have that. So now it's more like, I might say it's more like the future is in the present. Like, it's like seeing a little deeper into something, and then oh, okay, that's the next thing to do, and then I'll do it. Like, I don't know, like, for instance, I might look at a calendar, and then for no reason, I'm just looking. That's what's happening. I'm looking at a calendar, and I see a time and a date, and then there's just a knowing, like, oh, okay, then I have to book a flight. So then there's a flight, and there's a book the flight. But it all seems like it's happening in one moment, in one present, just appearing. So it doesn't feel sequential as much as it just feels like different conditions expressing. I don't know if that sounds different, but I think it feels quite different. So in one sense, you could say there's nothing moving, and then the conditions are constantly changing, and the mind can interpret that as time, but there's no time.
Yeah.
So planning happens in the present. Everything happens in the present, and it's just you don't have to believe in a future to plan.
Okay. My next question is, what do you think about the power of manifestation? But you already said that you don't have a sense of a doer, so I guess it doesn't matter for you if you can manifest whatever.
I would say it's interesting with choice. There's no sense of doership, but it doesn't mean there's no sense of choice. It's just that there's no one choosing. The whole environment is choosing. So it's like Dogen's term, total exertion. Like the whole universe is totally exerting itself in totality to create this, whatever this is, this appearance, this set of circumstances, this set of conditions. And it feels that way. It feels intimate, and it feels just coming into being right now. It feels so alive. That happening can also feel like a choice, but there's no sense that I'm making a choice about the environment out there, because there's no out there and there's no in here. It can feel like choices are made, but there's not anyone making the choice. I might say it like that. And what was the first part of the question?
So what do you think about the power of manifestation, you know, the secret and stuff like that? Because for me, it's a spiritual version of ego, of people wanting stuff.
I don't know that is, and the idea that like you can choose your thoughts and things like that, because if you really look, can you really choose your thoughts? Like,
no,
of course, like they just come, right? So yeah, I will say that, you know, maybe before someone's ready to really dig into what we're talking about, awakening, if they live in a life that's just very disorganized, or you grew up in an environment where you have a lot of disempowering beliefs about yourself, it can be valuable to try to formulate more empowering beliefs. But I would say it's not so much about choosing your thoughts. It's more about what you put your effort toward, like learning to actually put effort towards something and causing something to happen in your life, so that you feel a sense of self confidence almost. Because this process is quite can be quite a dramatic process. Like I think Osho said, you almost have to have a strong ego to get rid of the ego. You have to, you know, it's important to develop, you know, so if you haven't developed certain life stages, really, maybe this isn't the thing to do right now. Take care of other parts of your life first, that kind of thing. So then I think it's valuable, but it's more about focus and effort than it is about picking thoughts or something, or magical thinking.
Yeah, by the way, I love Osho. And he also said about the final end, like Buddha, about full anatta, I suppose. So yeah. So last question to you in this part. Do you still practice meditation?
Oh yeah, I meditate. I love to meditate. I don't always have time for it because of all the stuff I do, but I absolutely love it. Like if you said, Angelo, what would you rather just do the rest of your life? I'd rather go sit and meditate in a cave or a cabin for the rest of my life, because it's just so enjoyable. But I don't need to. But
No,
I do meditate for sure, and I love it.
You need to be there in the world for us, people who are interested in awakening, because you're doing such a good job in that.
Well, it's a meditative experience, just moving through the world too. Like what isn't meditation? Like for me, in one sense, everything is already meditating. It happens all the time. It just overtakes all the time anyway. So as a structured practice that's apart from the rest of life, I can't perceive it that way anymore. It just breaks through all the time. I could be sitting here waiting for you to come up onto Zoom, and I'm going to have a meeting, and it's 5 minutes, and that's a deep meditative samadhi is there already.
Wow.
Right? I mean, it's always the more you're available to it, the more you'll see it makes itself available to you.
Okay, so since we are in the topic of meditation, and I'm a Zen practitioner myself, so this is very, very interesting, because in Buddhist tradition, it seems like this tradition gravitates towards practicing a lot, like many hours a day for years or decades or even lifetimes to get awakened. So on the other hand, there are people who say that you don't need to practice at all. There's no one here, nothing to do, you don't need to meditate. So you already told something about it, but I want your further explanation in that. Where are you in this spectrum? Do you believe that? Because I don't understand how it's possible that some monks spends their entire lives meditating and they don't come to a realization. And on your channel, there are many people which they don't have experience in meditation and yet they awaken. So how is it possible, and how meditation correlates with awakening?
I love that question. That's such a good question. So I will tell you, based on my conditions, like my life condition, Angelo, the way Angelo was hooked up, the things that I value, especially in my earlier life, the way I thought about things, I very much saw it the way you do, and that's why Zen made so much sense to me. I want to give you a good answer to this. I have a lot of ways to answer this question, but I want to give you a good satisfying answer because, and I want to get across what changed for me. It might be something like this. Well, okay, I'll say this first. If we approach this question from the standpoint of trying to state that there's some objective truth to this, like, and then that's primary, and then applying the practitioners to that as secondary, that would be a mistake. I would flip that on its head and say it depends on the practitioner. Now, for some people, depending on the way our minds fixate, and one easy way to divide it would be into the masculine and feminine, or into the disintegrative and integrative aspect. Depending on how we fixate, the very belief you have that working really, really hard is going to get you somewhere, that could be your fixation. On the other hand, completely the other side of things, the belief that I don't have to do anything at all, that can be your fixation. You may be living in a world of hesitation and avoidance. That's the last person who should be listening to a Need to Advaita message. On the other hand, if you have a very strong sense of doership, making things happen, working hard, I'm not saying you shouldn't do Zen. I'm saying you really should look into the beliefs that are associated with it. And that will be that can be helpful. I generally, what's happening externally, whether the body mind is practicing, whether you're sitting in Zazen multiple hours a day or whether you're not at all, really is of little significance compared to what you actually believe about it, because of the beliefs are the fixating aspects, not the practice or non-practice. But I can use some counterexamples. For instance, if Zen is a reasonably austere, sometimes painful, and very practice-oriented sect of Buddhism, probably maybe one of the most practice-oriented or meditation-oriented compared to say like Dzogchen. If just working hard and pushing yourself to extremes and all that, if that equaled enlightenment, wouldn't people who do ultra marathons be enlightened? The way of the fakir, standing on one foot for a year, does that make you enlightened? I don't know, maybe not. So, but you can see how a fixation can get there, and you can also see how the ego can settle itself into there. My Zen teacher used to talk about this even during sesshin. He'd say, "Oh, the ego can get comfortable here. I can sit there and it's not too bad. I mean, there's a little bit of pain, but the food's not bad. It's very calm here. The mind is calm. Like, it can get used to that. You can get a little bit of an ego. Like I sit longer than anybody else. When the bell rings, I'm the last one to get up. Whatever. The ego is very slippery and subtle and sneaky. So sometimes those last remnants can really stick around, and they stick around in the external circumstances of your life. Again, not in the physicality, but in the belief about it. So this is why sometimes I tell people at some point later on, you may have to mix it up. It doesn't mean, if you're a Zen practitioner or a Dzogchen practitioner, completely abandoning that, but it may mean taking some time off or doing something different or using a different kind of technique or teacher, or going completely the opposite in your practice to a sort of surrendered practice, something else. Adyashanti is a great example. He was a Zen practitioner, and he was a hardcore Zen serious practitioner. He was a competitive athlete. Like, you could see how he was hooked up for it. And yet he knew he had to get the other side of things. He got interested in Christian mysticism, and he read these already dead female Christian mystics and the heart-based approach and all that. Like, he had to find that aspect as well. So yeah, that's the overall context. Now, I was surprised when I started doing retreats at my house that a lot of the people initially were female. Whether or not that mattered, I don't know, but they didn't have spiritual backgrounds. They didn't have spiritual interests. They were just very awake people. They were people who oriented to awakening, and they would meditate laying down and all that, and I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it. I was like, whatever, however you want to meditate, it's fine. But in my mind, it's like you lay down, you fall asleep, because I do, but not everybody does. And they were waking up. I mean, I've seen people wake up who just don't even like to meditate really, but they're athletic, they run. But they inquire like crazy. They sit there and inquire all day long naturally. That's really powerful practice. So so just be willing to challenge your own paradigms of what practice even is. What about the practice of surrender? Like from the masculine aspect, practice is sitting, meditating. It's rigid, hard, pushing yourself, all that. What about what is practice from the feminine aspect? Absolute devotion and giving yourself fully to the moment, to love, to taking care of someone, to a cause, to those kinds of things. So there are a lot of ways to practice, and it's not always traditional Buddhist meditative type of ways either. Yeah. So I just say open the mind up a little bit about that and explore this. But it does come down to the individual. And when I work with somebody going through the awakening process, what I feel and what I address is just fixation. Wherever they're fixating, wherever that fixation is, that's where we go. And they could be fixating in an avoidant way. And so that would be not someone I would say, go watch Neo-Advaita videos, right? Because what happens is their mind uses that to justify staying away from everything, staying out of life, not engaging. And then, more disassociation happens, more derealization happens, and it's just not a healthy way to go. And some people have even killed themselves because of that, right? So, on the other hand, sometimes if you really believe in doership and your practice, and you've been working very hard for many, many years, and you just feel absolutely frustrated, sometimes hearing that message at the right time is what it takes, and then you just let go. So to me, a lot of that starts to be a less of an issue after awakening. After awakening, you start to trust more and more your own instincts on where you need to look, how you need to inquire, where you need to let go, where you need to put in some actual work. Maybe you need to put some structure of meditation in. And so it's different for every person, especially after awakening, in my experience. And I just feel into it with them. And some people I do recommend, I really think you should put in start to put in a daily practice of meditation, even if they don't feel like that's something they would normally do. Other people I have told, like, stop reading all this stuff. Seriously, stop reading Buddhist books. Like, stop it. It's just filling up your mind. Every time I talk to you, all you want to do is talk about Buddhist concepts. That's not helping you, So it really depends on where a person's fixating. And I look at this less from a structural paradigm or a traditional paradigm or a dogmatic paradigm, and more from an individual paradigm. What does that person need to let go a little bit more? Where are they holding on? Where are they fixating? What beliefs are forming their view of reality, and how can we get behind that? And then at some point it won't matter whether you sit a lot or don't sit a lot. It just won't matter. I know liberated people who have very rigid sitting practices, and I know some that don't at all.
Wow, this is so powerful. So in the summary, would you agree that more important than sitting meditation is just looking into your beliefs and questioning them?
Yes. Yeah. Inquiry is extremely powerful, and it's not it's because it's not really a practice. It's more like a portal, because at some point there's nothing but inquiry, but it's not an intellectual thing at all. There's just it turns into something like fascination with experience, fascination with appearance. And it's actually part of the appearance. It's like a love. It's like a fascination. And so inquiry properly done in an open-ended way, in a flexible, fluid way, in an adaptable way, with genuine curiosity, just gets more and more and more organic, natural, spontaneous, and it's sort of a non-practice. But you still have to have enough intention there, enough alertness to see when you're also going unconscious, when you're getting just lost on the thought train. And meditation definitely helps with all of this, just because it calms everything down. And what I call natural meditation, shikantaza, is hugely valuable once you can do it. The weird thing about shikantaza, it's very hard to teach a beginner for some reason. I know for me, I didn't get it for a long time. And then when it clicked. I was like, oh God, I didn't even know it was shikantaza for a while, until it was like, oh my God, that's what they were talking about. So
but it's always shikantaza anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there's that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing you said about ego getting comfortable, I can tell from my own experience that even the hardest session, after some time, it's just getting comfortable. It's not a challenge anymore. You have some structure in your day. You just go to the meditate. You go to the for a walk. You just go for a dinner to eat. You go to sleep, and you repeat that. And after some time, it's not a challenge anymore, and ego gets comfortable with that. So if you don't question the one who's meditating, who's doing all that stuff, then you might not wake up. And from what I've seen.
Yeah, I like to expose people to different things. You know, like if you have a very scientific mind, I might say expose yourself to something artistic. You know, like go do improv class and pick up improv or acting classes, because they just teach you to experience yourself in such a completely different way. You know, again, I don't outwardly recommend psychedelics a lot, but you know, people who are inclined that way, I'm like, yeah, give it a shot. I mean, that may be what just you just may need a pattern reset. You may need to, you know, shake things up enough to just suddenly, you know, break open. And
Yeah. Okay.
it's what's so fun about this is it's just an adventure. It's an adventure, and if you take it on as an adventure, that you could say it's like the hero's journey. You have to go beyond the known. You have to. You think of it as an adventure and a mysterious process. It really orients you in a cool way, I think, as long as you're willing to go past your fear of the mysterious and the unknown.
Okay, so what is spiritual bypassing? What's your definition on that?
Well, it depends, I think, at the level of your own insight. So before awakening, you can spiritually bypass by just learning spiritual concepts and just applying them in a way that either is kind of manipulative. You're just trying to put on a spiritual front for people so that you can get away with other things and not look at deeper things in yourself. Someone like that is often pretty obviously kind of dysfunctional, probably, to people around them, hopefully. But they may be able to fool some people. But it's really just an avoidance of like your deeper motivations that you actually have, maybe a lot of manipulative tendencies and things like that. After awakening, there's going to be some degree of it anyway, because in one sense, emotional bypassing is what everybody already does. Like, to even before awakening, it's hard to even perceive how much avoidance there is of emotion in humans. It's amazing. It's fascinating that we do this. But the deeper realization goes, the more you realize, like, not only have you repressed a lot of emotions, like everybody does it, and we teach each other to do it, and we use communication and talk. We actually use that to continue to avoid emotions. So it's kind of ubiquitous. It's a sort of group hypnosis in a way. So you will notice, like, oh my gosh, I've always been bypassing in one sense. So then you're called to take up the challenge. So if I have been bypassing, and I know I could even be bypassing right now, do I want to take up that challenge? Do I just want to go, okay, there's no one to do anything, there's no work to do, there's no one who could inquire, who's going to inquire, you know, who's going to do? If you want to believe that about your and you have some access to awareness, some clarity, you can fool yourself with that for probably the rest of your life. Or you can say, yeah, there is clarity here. There is, when I sit, there is just consciousness. There's no sense of really even a self at some point in samadhi and so forth. And yet, yes, I do get triggered. Actually, I still have jealousy. I still have shame at certain times. It's situational, and not overlook that. If you don't overlook, then you won't bypass. You know, if you're just willing to see all the different parts of your life and not just cherry pick when you feel like you're in samadhi or when you feel like you're spiritual, and actually look, okay, yeah, I guess I do have some anger, you know, still. That's a good thing to see. Just see it in yourself. Everybody has it. I've never seen anybody wake up ever who didn't have a lot of repressed emotional material they still had to work with. I've not seen it. You will. And it's okay. And it doesn't mean it's good, you have to do it the rest of your life, but a huge part of it is just acknowledgement of what you're even feeling with yourself. Just if you're feeling anger, just recognize that you're feeling anger. If you're feeling frustration, recognize that you're feeling frustration. And it will actually take you where you really want to go. Because where you want to go is, in one sense, back to that experience of awakening where there really is flow and peace and a sort of peaceful, intimate, and yet, I don't want to say detached, but you're not pushed and pulled around by your thoughts and by even events. You feel a peace, you feel an equanimity. That's where you want to go back to. You can't go back to it as a memory, and you can't go back to it by bypassing. You have to go back to it by going down through and being fully honest with yourself about what you're feeling, first of all. And then the resistance patterns around it and kind of letting those dissolve, and then inquiring into some beliefs and stuff can be very helpful there.
Okay, so can you bypass by meditation? For example, I have this willingness to meet my emotions, whatever it is. But when I get angry or frustrated, or I feel something I don't want to feel, I go to meditate, and I know that in 5-10 minutes, when I just look straight into this emotion, it will dissolve, it will turn into peace. Is it bypassing, or is it facing emotions directly?
Yeah, I think in that case, I'm not even sure there's an exact answer that's going to be right. So, generally speaking, I would say meditation is not bypassing anything really. In fact, I say often that once you have access to, say, let's just call it unbound consciousness, to the sort of formless conscious space where thoughts can be there or not, but there's no attachment or pushing and pulling on thoughts. Once you have access to that, just spending time in that every day, or however much you can or want to, it does passively dissolve vasanas, fixations. It does it passively, but it kind of does it slowly. It can momentarily work, as you mentioned, because the conditions change and all of a sudden you're not angry, but that reactivity isn't gone. The reactivity is there. It's just waiting for the next set of conditions to present itself. So at some point, I wouldn't say that meditation is bypassing, but you may need to add a little something else. And that something else is, when you're not meditating, be willing to go right into that reaction body, to find the reaction body, to find what is the trigger point. What is it about this moment that I'm not okay with, and being honest about it, and seeing, whoa, that's what I want. That's what I actually believe the world should look like. And then you start getting into this thing where you see that, my God, I've been looking at the world through this lens of how it should be my whole life, rather than how it is. And everyone who's meditated, and especially has gone through awakening and stuff, have tasted equanimity, true equanimity. You've tasted it, but it's fleeting, right? That's where this work comes in, where you can trace down these reaction triggers all the way down. And to do that, you have to not go into meditation. You have to go into the uncomfortable, like into the raw discomfort, actually, into the place of helplessness, where you see, like, I can't actually change this moment. Something we don't want to see, because let's say once you've fully seen that you can't change this moment, it's over. The point of having an inner world is zero. There's no point of even having an inner world. And at some point it will go away. So there's something in our conditioning that really does not want to do this desire and ill will work, let's say, desire and aversion. And I'll also say, in my experience, desire is not the primary, it's aversion. Aversion is the primary movement, and then desire is something that just amplifies aversion to incredible heights of addiction and everything else, but it's totally avoidant. You don't see that you're actually having an aversion to something.
And it's fascinating because thanks to you again, I started not to avoid emotions, and I'm with curiosity, I try to look there. What's actually the sensations of anger, frustration, or sadness, or whatever. And even emotions that were very hard for me and I avoided them all my life, when I just look there, it just kind of pleasant, like when you put 100% attention in that space. Where is that? How do I feel it? Where is it? And it's just pleasant feeling, and I don't understand why did I avoid it all my life.
It's nuts. Like I say, it's like a group hypnosis. There's no one doing it maliciously, but we're all doing it, right? Until we're not. So I'm so pleased to hear you say that. Truly, that I love watching people go through awakening, but if they go through awakening and they never realize what you just said, they will be frustrated for the rest of their life, because it'll be coming and going all the time. When you can do what you just talked about and keep doing it until you know you're done with it. You're done when essentially the reactivity is done. But anyway, if you're willing to just go all the way in with curiosity, what do I actually feel? Feel it in the body, feel the patterns. Is it up here and down here? Is there anything here? Is there any separation here? Is there even resistance here? Like, just absolute curiosity. In the moment, it can be surprising when there's just not that much there. Sometimes there'll be a lot of polarity and it's kind of hard to do this, but the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. At some point, you'll notice the external manifestations when you're like, whoa, I didn't react at all. I would have usually reacted to that situation, and there's like literally no reaction. And all of a sudden it's just gone for you, and you can move on to the next thing fluidly, and you let go. That's like as you're moving into transient nature.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even if you don't resist the resistance, it's just some kind of another level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the difference between insight or experience during meditation and a permanent shift in identity or realization?
Well, really what you said is it's really a matter of identity. So you can have tremendously powerful, mind-blowing, expansive, even non-dual experiences. They come and go, but it appears to you that they came and went in the timescape of a practitioner. And what's interesting about this is often when that happens, that's the person's the most inclined to describe these things in very dramatic detail and to their friends and everything. Not always, but often that's how it is. When it's actually realization, you realize there's not much to say about it, because instead of seeing it as an experience from a separate identity, it's just like, oh, the identity itself just not just untied, and the identity itself is already experiencing non-dual experience, like non-dualistically sounding, sensationing. Even objects are not discrete and separate at all. So what do you say about that? It's first of all, you see there's nothing you can say about it. And the second thing is to label it or talk about it as kind of like, it's not a bad thing. It's just, why? What's the point, right? And the only point ends up being at some point is to maybe help someone else experience it or realize it. But it really has to do with identity level transformation.
Okay.
And it's kind of a subtractive thing more than an additive thing. You don't subtract something from yourself, and I don't need to subtract anything from you. And yet something that seemed to be there is just not there. And it's an identity structure. It's a fixation.
Okay. Okay. I ask because I had some experiences with unbound consciousness, and it was clear for me that there's no thinker of thoughts, there's no doer. It's all happening all by itself. And it's just some movement of a consciousness. It's so clear. And yet I've already seen that there's nobody here, and I still tend to believe in thoughts. And I don't understand why it's so binding. Once you see that Santa Claus isn't real, you stop believing in Santa Claus. And I've seen that there's no thinker, and yet I still get caught by that. And I don't understand why. Why is that? Is it the case?
That's the I am sense sticking around. To put it simply. So to take your analogy, I might make it like this. The difference is, instead of seeing that you don't believe in Santa Claus, the Santa Claus is an illusion, you see that there's no one that believed in Santa Claus in the first place. So then the illusion of Santa Claus could be there or not. There's nothing holding on to it. And there's also nothing holding on to there not being a Santa Claus. This is that really weird place where talking about no self is like, you can also celebrate the relative self. You can be any self. There's a much more fluidity in the relative identity because there's no attachment. But make no mistake about it, you can't just use what I just said to make yourself comfortable because you're actually afraid of letting go of self. Yeah, not you, but I've seen people do this, where it's like this whole thing's just about being more human and just being more accepting of all your human qualities and characteristics and emotions and all. And that's true. But if you're using that to avoid insight, you will set yourself up for like an existential terror that's really, really heavy. So in one sense, I love that about Buddhism, because Buddhism starts telling you from the beginning, there's no self. It's a Dharma seal, right? Now you can't actually process that at first, for sure, but it's kind of nice to at least have some sense of where you're going, or where things are going, right? Anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, you can expect that.
How could you? You can't anticipate it.
Yeah.
Because the anticipating sense is the one that is distracting from seeing what's actually not there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I have some more questions to go. I know that it was a lot. But do
Fine.
you
I
have
don't mind at
some more
all.
time?
Yeah, let me
Okay.
check. Yeah, we have a little more time. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit deeper than that. The self in the Advaita Vedanta versus non-self in Buddhism. Do you really think that Buddhists went deeper than Advaita Vedanta and they transcended the self?
You know, it's interesting. I think what we're talking about when we talk about Advaita, traditional Advaita, the
Mhm,
Upanishads, um, and we compare that to, say, the the suttas or Buddhism. What we're really comparing is spiritual traditions rather than the depth of realization of an individual person.
mhm,
Because I'm quite sure, from what I see now, I'm quite sure that there were many Advaitins before Buddha that had realized no self. I'm not sure they
mhm,
talked about it, but maybe they didn't write about it. And also, that's something that's really important to understand the historical context. That in these
mhm,
historical places, I don't know, I'm not a scholar, but in a lot of other like Western societies and stuff, in the past, the people who wrote it all were certain people. They were often men. They were often, sometimes they educated people, and or maybe in the suttas, it was the monastic tradition that wrote all of this stuff within
mhm,
100 to 400 years after Buddha's death, right? When it actually first got codified. So,
mhm,
so you have to consider all of those filters that are there, right? So, there could have easily been people walking around who realized no self. They just
mhm,
didn't teach it, or they taught it and no one was codifying it, no one was writing it down or verbally transmitting it, so it just didn't
mhm,
get put anywhere. I can see very easily how in the Advaita tradition, in the Hindu tradition, um, the I am sense became the sort of fundamental, the Brahman. It became Brahman
yeah.
consciousness, the fundamental truth. I can see
Mhm,
that because it feels very much like that. It feels
mhm,
very, very much like formless non-dual is so powerfully, ecstatically bizarre and amazing and indescribable and ineffable. But there can and still is, there's something still trying to enjoy it. There's something in the background. Adyashanti has said you could totally not even notice this remainder of self that's left, right?
mhm,
So I can see how that could become a tradition, and a very
mhm,
powerful and deeply insightful tradition for sure. And then Buddha, for whatever historical reasons, very much emphasized anatta, like very clearly, and going beyond the self and so forth. So I think a lot of this has to do with just historical reasons rather than, oh, Buddhists always realize no self and Advaitins never do. It's just not like that. I don't. It's not, from my experience. I mean, I've seen people who realize no self who are definitely not Buddhists. I've seen many
mhm,
Buddhists who have not realized no self. So, um,
mhm,
but the literature, as far as what I've read, and I haven't read a ton of the Upanishads, but I've read a handful of the ones that the Advaita Vedanta tradition typically says is their salient Upanishads, and it tends to point to I am sense, to Brahman consciousness that is a deep stage of realization. It's just not no self. It's not full no self realization.
mhm,
And then the suttas definitely point to no self realization. So, or at least at the very least, I've heard one scholar talk about the suttas in this sense that he said Buddha actually never said there is no self. He just said hundreds of times, look here, is there a self? Look there, is there a self? Do you find a self here? Do you find a self there? So he's
mhm,
showing it through inquiry, which is great. But
mhm,
in Mahayana tradition, one of the dharma seals is there's essentially no self, right? Um,
mhm,
so yeah, traditionally and through dogma, you could say that there is that significant difference. But again, like Nisargadatta very clearly said it. I'm sure others had
mhm,
realized it. There's a Catholic nun named Bernadette Roberts. If you read her book called the Experience of No Self, I think it's called. I've only read like one chapter, but the first paragraph, this lady realized no self. She talked about how she was in this spiritual bliss for many years, daily, all day long, and then all of a sudden, when self dropped away, she was very surprised. It was just gone, completely came to an end. And
yeah.
anyone who's gone through that knows that. Adyashanti made a really cool analogy to that in his book, his audio book, Resurrecting Jesus. He said, as soon as I heard the last words Christ said on the cross, which was, my God, why have you forsaken me? He said, I know exactly what he meant by that. He's talking about the death of self and how surprising that can be to some people. It can be devastating to people even after all their stuff they've gone through, but usually for a short time, because who's going to grieve it? Who's going to grieve the loss of something that never existed?
Yeah. Okay. So what about God? Because you often say that there is a higher intelligence that you need to trust, that it's intelligence beyond the human dimension. That's your words from many interviews I've seen. So isn't it God, that intelligence?
Not to me, it's not, but I have no problem with that, with the idea of God, the word of God, and the experience of God. What I usually do with people is I work within the framework of where they're functioning. So if someone has a deep and profound intuitive connection with God, that's great. Let's explore what that is. Well, how do you know that? What do you know about that? Can you dive into it? Can you let go more? So that's fine. I can work in that paradigm. For myself, when I talk about this deeper intelligence, I know a lot of people equate the word intelligence to a God, to a figure, to an entity. I don't, but I will say I'm 100% sure that this paradigm I'm talking about, or this truth I'm talking about, is completely alive in Buddhism, and it's called prajna wisdom. So there you go.
Yeah.
Have faith in prajna wisdom, just like the Bodhisattva of compassion did in the Heart Sutra.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a matter of definition, because as God, I don't mean some entity, some some Christian view on that, because I see it like the higher intelligence beyond human dimension, just like you say. So that's my definition of God.
Yeah, it's where that I think that's exactly the way to approach it that makes sense to me intuitively, and that is, if you really trust a power that's that far beyond you, then you can't know a damn thing about it, and you have to be willing to go into the unknown. It's leading you right into the unknown. All I care about is people get led into the unknown one way or another. If you really want to know, be willing to go into the unknown.
Yeah, but I believe that for some people it's easier to go to the unknown when you have that some kind of faith and trust in something you can comprehend, at least in some level.
I think it's probably more not that you believe it, it's more that something has told you it's safe and okay. Christ told you, knock on the door, it'll be opened. Rumi told you, I was knocking like with insanity on the door and I opened, I was on the inside. I tell you, it's okay to go through an intense physiologic fear barrier. So I think that's probably the value of it, is you come to this, the valley of the shadow of death, and yet something tells you, oh, it's actually okay to go into that. It's okay to go into the void. That's probably the value of that, more than the actual belief in a certain type of entity. That's just my guess.
Yeah. And by the way, how did you know about intense fear barrier? Because I don't think I mentioned that. And yeah, I have big problem with that, I guess. So your reading is good. Yeah.
Oh, I felt it. I went through it myself. I feel like it was a couple months before awakening, but it was sometime within 6 months before awakening. I remember meditating. I wasn't inquiring. I was just meditating. It was very peaceful. And I just sort of gave into the peace even more. I just kind of let go into it. And then all of a sudden there was this very intense fear barrier, and I literally stopped meditating immediately. And I stood up and I was like, what the hell was that? It just came out of nowhere. And I didn't analyze it. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't turned off from meditation. I disregarded it. So I kept meditating, doing my things over the next couple months. And when it came again, actually, I remember maybe a month or two after that, an insight came to me completely out of the blue during the day when I wasn't meditating. And it was, oh, that fear thing. If I ever come against that again, I'm going through it. I want to know what's on the other side of it. I just knew I was going to do it. And so when it came back in meditation, during inquiry, when I was really going deep, and it came back, there was an instinct that just said, it's okay, let go through this. And I did. But a lot of people will describe it as a feeling of like, I'm going to die. It's that your heart's pounding, your body feels it, and you're in fear.
So for some people it's a fear of death, but I've seen that it's not very uncommon that people are afraid of, for example, solipsism, and I'm afraid of that. So what's your take on solipsism and nihilism, or the isms? What's your
The
take on
isms.
that? Yeah.
Generally, I say when someone's asking that, what I sense is they're asking it from an intellectual place. And those are philosophical positions. What I want to get you to is a place where it's so obvious. Truth is so obvious that you're not worried about, is it this or is it that? It doesn't make sense to think about it in those terms. To address it specifically, the sense of solipsism is nothing I've ever experienced. That's kind of the ego's perspective on the world that's amplified to such a degree that it scares itself. That's kind of what I see with solipsism. And then with nihilism, it's like I've never hit personally a place of total nihilism, and I think to get there, you probably requires some avoidant nature of yourself, probably somewhere. I've felt loneliness for sure. I felt sadness. I felt grief. I felt loss. I felt boredom. I don't know. It's been so long. I mean, I remember thinking I was bored as a kid, but I don't remember what it was like. But people do come to this like spiritual desert, but it doesn't usually feel like nihilism. It feels more like they have a sense that this is supposed to happen and it's okay. And I usually just tell them it is okay and it's a phase and it won't be there forever. But do probe a little bit for any repressed emotion, because often that's underlying it. But I've never really seen anybody led completely into nihilism without being pretty mind identified still.
Yeah. Okay. So we are almost done.
Okay.
I know
sweet.
there was so
This was
many
great.
questions. So maybe two last questions.
Sure.
What about love? Because many people say that it's the highest teachings. It's all about the love. What do you think about that?
I'll say a quote that's in my book, and I say this quote a lot because I love it. It's probably my favorite thing I've ever heard my Zen teacher say, and it is, he said, you could say that ultimately enlightenment's about living out of the innermost promptings of your heart, your loving heart. He said, but without insight, without awakening, you'll think you're living out of the innermost promptings of your heart, and you'll be acting out of the outermost promptings of your deluded ego. So insight is critical. And so that's why I usually skew towards just helping people wake up, and then they can decide what love is, how it moves. With that said, it's exquisitely powerful. It's an exquisitely powerful force. But if you're mind identified, you can think you're acting out of love, and you can be pretty violent, actually. You may not be, but you can be. It's possible. You know.
So would you agree that love is the highest teaching?
No. I would
so
say
what
not.
is?
I would say love is the last remnant of anything in physicality that when you're right on the edge of nothing and something, the only something that there is love. It's a kind of love. It's like an unconditional love. It's just an ecstasy of being. It's a vibrational enjoyment of the physical appearances of the luminosity, to put it in like Buddhist terms. And it feels like very much like love, I would say. But as far as a teaching, it's such a loaded thing that I think it can lead people astray. I think it's a good practice if you can practice metta practices like compassionate practices, volunteering, things like that, with not looking for anything in return. But it's good to ask yourself, do I have agendas here? Because you could have a lot of agendas around it. The highest teaching that's a really, really good question. I might say the highest teaching, at least in this moment, I may answer it differently at another time, would be self-inquiry. The highest teaching is not a teaching, it's a curiosity. It's to trust your own natural curiosity about the big questions.
Yeah. Okay. So I think last question, or yeah, I think it's last. What about relationships? When you realize that it's only oneself and you are the same with the person you love, is it different? How does relationship change after realization?
Yeah, I would say it definitely changes things. There's no doubt. It changes because it changes everything. It can be really challenging if you're in a relationship with somebody and you're waking up, or you have woken up, and they are opposed to it themselves. That can be really, it can cause a lot of friction, because it's not like you have to sell it to them. It's not like you even have to talk about it, but energetically they'll feel it. and they may feel like you're moving away from them. Something is going away. The relationship you used to share doesn't feel like it's there for them because you don't do it in a mental way anymore. So it can be challenging from that standpoint. I've also seen people who I actually want to do a video about this because I've seen it several times, where the one partner starts waking up, and maybe they do wake up, and it's kind of a sort of steep path, and their partner's like freaked out, like, what the hell's going on? I don't understand any of this. This is all new to me. And then they wake up, and sometimes they even wake up more, which is a really interesting thing to see. I can think of several examples of that. So what I usually tell people when it comes to relationships, it's something like, if your relationship is really based on mutual support, trust, love, it'll adapt. You'll adapt, and your partner will adapt. But also don't push it on them ever. Understand that it's confusing for other people a lot of times, just like it was confusing for you when you first came in contact with it. And be patient, but don't impose it on them. And then just keep waking up yourself. Don't try to use it to fix the relationship, or don't try to have expectations about your partner around spirituality. Just keep waking up yourself. They may or may not wake up, but something will clarify in them, probably just because they're around you, and it's not like you're doing it. It's a local effect, but it tends to kind of have a watershed effect on people around you.
Yeah. Oh, great. Have you seen a movie called Everything Everywhere at Once, by the way?
Good, yeah.
Yeah.
Really
What
good.
do you think about it?
I liked it. It's a little like high speed. The edits are like so I mean, it's like a little bit sensory overload, but I really enjoyed it. It was really fun to watch, and it had so many hidden, clever pointings in it. The acting was great. Have you seen Revolver?
I've seen you recommend that, but I couldn't
Revolver is
find
my
it.
favorite,
But
like, mainstream non-duality movie.
yeah, okay, I'll
It's
check
full
this
on.
out.
It's good. Yeah, it's really good. And watch
Yeah,
the end, the credits. In the credits, they interview a bunch of people about ego. It's super fascinating.
yeah. Once I've watched Everything Everywhere at Once. I've remembered that you mentioned about parallel lives and multi-universe. You had experience like that. So do you think that it's genuine, um, that this movie shows it correctly,
I would say
how it goes?
the best visual depiction I can think of in a movie is at the end of Interstellar,
Okay.
when he's in that three-dimensional, like, I don't know what you call a nexus or something,
Yeah.
and the
And
past and
there's
the
a
future, and it's
connection.
all connected, and everything's connected to each other. That's much more
Yeah.
energetically what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, because in the multi-universe, I think it's an assumption that there's a self and you can copy that in the multi-dimension, and I
yeah,
think it's unrealistic.
right. I totally agree with that. That's right. It's an energetic thing. The other movie I would recommend, or it's a series, I think I might be on Netflix. It's called Devs, Devs.
Yeah.
It just came out not too long ago, and it's very much about this that we're talking about, the many worlds theory, the Everett interpretation of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. But it's sci-fi, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, okay. And do you still experience those? I
Yeah,
mean, I mean yourself in the some other dimension, or do you have some experiences like that?
it's like that kind of all the time in a certain way. Yeah, it's very hard to talk
Okay.
about it though.
Okay.
It doesn't feel
Okay.
like I'm even in this one fully. It's like energetics of like, it's very hard to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll end here. Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Very cool. Thanks, man.
How did you enjoy? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
How did
I
you like
love
the
the
questions?
format. Perfect. Really good questions. Really good. Yeah. Some of those
Thank
came
you.
from friends of yours, or did you say?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There were
Mhm.
more than one people involved here
Okay.
in those
Good.
questions.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
So thank you very much for watching. If you like this, please put the like button and subscribe, and necessarily go to the YouTube channel of Angelo, Simply Always Awake, and you need this book. Seriously, Awake, it's your turn. This is the best book I have ever read. So
Oh,
definitely you need to check this out. So thank you very much, Angelo, for your time. I
thank you
really
so much. I
appreciate it.
really appreciate it. Yeah. I'll post this as well on some groups and stuff. So
Thank you. Thank you very
yeah.
much.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.